annoying they were, but we're doing the same thing, and I think it's fun. I can see why they did it because it is fun to get together with your friends and be outside. And on January 10th, we had a really nice sized pop up. We only had how long did we have that we publicized that? I don't remember, Susan. I think it was a couple of days. It was only about 48 hours. We didn't even have a week. But this was after Renee Good's killing, just 2 days after Renee Good's killing. And we had 450, somewhere between 450 and 500. Yes, Emily, we are recording this. Um, we had 450 to 500 people at Johnson Park on Riverside. We had lots of encouraging waves and honks, and only a very few people who gave us negative feedback. And got lots of good publicity and news people.
Susan, I'm sorry, your mic just muted.
If everyone else would stay muted, please. I was trying to mute someone else that we were getting background noise, and Susan's name popped in there. Sorry.
Okay. So as I was saying, we got really great publicity. We got a lot of news coverage, and this was really fun too. And it was also very, very meaningful at a time when people are in so much pain and so upset and so unhappy that these things are going on. And we get a lot of discouraging comments from trolls on Facebook that, oh, this is useless. And it's absolutely not useless because, as we can see, Trump is paying a lot of attention to public opinion, and he has reassigned his little commandant in Minnesota. Has been sent back to California and removed from duty, and Kristi Noem's job may be on the line. So, which would be wonderful. I would love to see her out of there, unless they put somebody worse in there. So this is important. What we are doing is very important. It does mean something. It is noticed, and we are doing what we need to be doing. We need to work on refining our demands and our expectations, and we need to move into electoral politics soon because of the midterms coming up. But we also, just the visibility that we get and the awareness that people have that they're not alone and that they are not the only progressive person in their world is absolutely priceless and very important. So thanks to everybody who showed up, and the ones who didn't, I hope you can come to the next one. And coming soon, here's our upcoming. So we're going to the movies again on February 17th. Where is that going to be? Is it going to be at okay. Oh, it's a Circle Cinema. Yeah. On the life of Barbara Jordan, the groundbreaking Texas Congresswoman. I remember her very well. She was an amazing person. I'm looking forward to seeing this one. And you do need to RSVP, so remember to do that. Our bridge protests are happening every Tuesday at 4 o'clock, except they didn't happen today because of the weather. And they are. I have not been to one, I have to confess, but they are a lot of fun. And the people that go are really having a good time and really doing some great signs and putting out some great messages. So they're every week. So people that need to say that we need to do more demonstrations. We have small ones all the time, and every couple of months we have a really big one. And we've got a really big one coming up, but we don't have the date yet. So the No Kings 3 is going to be not very long. And in other news, we've got 501c4 status now, and we're official. We have a bank account, and we're registered with the state of Oklahoma for charitable solicitations. So we are doing this as infrastructure to make sure that we can keep going on a permanent basis and keep causing as much trouble as we can for a long, long time. And our February meeting is going to be the 26th at 6:30 p.m. With Austin Webb with the Oklahoma Policy Institute. If you all are not familiar with Oklahoma Policy Institute, yes, yeah, I'm looking at the chat. Yes, Beth Delancey did a great job of getting our not-for-profit status. We couldn't have done it without her. Oklahoma Policy Institute is is just the most wonderful progressive organization in the state. I think they work really hard. They put out daily updates on what's going on in state politics, and you can subscribe to their news bulletins, and they're very long and very informative. And every week they put out a kind of a summary of the whole week. So we're really, if you don't subscribe to those, you really should. But we're going to have somebody from them coming to see us on February 26th. And on March 3rd, we're going to have a legislative team day of action with the Oklahoma Policy Institute that I was just praising. And so there's going to be more information about that soon, but do put that on your calendar if you feel like you can make time to go to that. That would be a great thing to attend.
I'd like to introduce Donna. She's going to take over.
Okay.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Donna Matthews, and I am the chair of the Legislative Committee. What we want to do for this group, let me get my notes up. What we want to do for this group is to be aware, pay attention to legislation that is coming forward in Oklahoma, and then make recommendations to this group. So like if we see something coming and it's going to have a committee vote on Friday, but on Tuesday we can tell you and get the email out or get the word out, get a post out, and we can make a difference that way. So we're going to try to stay on top of a lot of legislation. I'm going to have a little blurb here to say that if you're interested in this, get in touch with me, because we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We already have access to some information that already exists, of people keeping track of different kinds of bills. So I would love to visit with you about it. I think we'll have another committee meeting this Friday afternoon. I don't have a place yet. About 3:30 on Friday, we're going to have another committee meeting. So would love to have you join us, but we just want to be able to stay informed. You don't have to be a research guru or anything, just be interested. And so what we did want to say is, what was that? Well, that was March 3rd, that it's up there now. But February 17th, we're having kind of a little intro trip that some of us are going to go to the Capitol. And Beth Husen, who is going to speak to us in just a little bit, I'll introduce her in a second. She's going to take us on 217 and show us around, find our legislator's office, find their assistant's office, just find our way around the Capitol, and then give us some pointers, I believe also. She can tell us in a minute with some pointers about how to approach them, what to say, and all of that. And then we'll go back on 3/3 with those people knowing how to find their way around. There'll be a lot more of us going on that day, and the Oklahoma Policy Institute will be there that day too. And we will get some more training, and then we can actually go talk to our legislators on that day because it's an action day. We're going to carpool for both trips, and like I said, we'll get some training on how to talk. We'll meet their staff if we don't get to meet them. Some of them will be glad to see us. Most of them probably will. Hopefully be glad to see us. This little image that's up there is a great rendition of how a bill makes it through the state legislature, but you better have some wine when you're trying to make it down that road, I think. So I did want to introduce Beth Husen. And Beth, if there's anything more that I didn't say about those 2 days, feel free. But Beth has a project she calls the Soul Box. And yeah, you want a glass of wine, so do I. And she's going to talk to us about that and how important that is. And she's going to talk to us about gun violence. And I'm delighted that we can hear from her. So Beth, tell us a little bit more about yourself and we can go on from there.
Okay.
Real quick, I need to make sure I have the right person unmuted. So, is it Beth's AirPad?
Yeah, it's my
Oh,
iPad.
gotcha. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
Great. Thanks for.
Sure. Well, I can't see myself, so that's probably a good thing. um, I just wanted to thank you guys for giving me this time to talk to your group and tell them about what our family's trying to do. And I hope that February 17th would be a great day for you guys to kind of get your feet wet before March. Because March, I know I've been to one of their capital trips with the Oklahoma Policy Institute, and they've got it down, and it's a busy day. It's a long, busy day, but great, very fulfilling. So, but ours is a little bit different because it's really just a come and go. It's grab a friend, come to the Capitol, show your support, and then also talk to some legislators about some of the gun laws that will be up on the docket by then. We're hoping that everybody can come by our exhibit, and we will give you a script with the gun laws that are most dangerous. We've got a few congressmen that help us kind of figure out which ones are going to be heard most likely by a committee. A lot of times they aren't heard. So there's, no reason to really talk about them. But even if you don't want to talk about a specific law, there's also you can just go in there and let them know that you want them to vote no on dangerous gun laws, period. And we'll give you a scan code of an app of where you can find your legislators if you need to. I think most of this group would know who they are by now, but if you don't, we can help you find them. So, but yeah, I'd like to kind of share a little more about why we are doing the Soulbox project and how it came about. Since we're on Zoom, I want everyone to I can't see you, so I'm just going to ask everybody to just take a moment to think if you or someone you know has been affected by gun violence. Most of the time I let people raise their hand, and I will say that most of the time I have a full room of hands. But so you guys know who you are, and probably someone who knows someone. If it touches everyone. But again, my name is Beth Husen, and I know that there's a lot of things that you guys could be listening to about right now, so I appreciate you taking the time. June 1st, 2022 is a day that I will never forget, when gun violence and gun safety became very painful and personal to me. That day, I was relieved to be arriving home after an exhausting 10-day, 8th grade history trip. And we were halfway through the flight when my friend looked at me and said, "There was a shooting at St. Francis." And I gave her this terrified look. And she said, "It was in the Nally building." And I said, "My sister-in-law works in the Nally building." And then moments later, she said, "It was on the 2nd floor." And I said, "My sister-in-law works on the 2nd floor." And I had myself had been a patient of hers 5 months before. And so then my heart just dropped because I just knew. I knew because I knew she always worked late. And so I just tried to look at the screen on my phone for the rest of the flight, but I couldn't concentrate with all the thoughts running through my head. And so, unfortunately, I began to cry. And my daughter asked me, what was wrong? And I tried to tell her as honestly as I could. And then, of course, she started to cry. And I tried to be strong for her and I tried to tell her, let's try to think positive. What are the chances? But moments later, she threw up all over herself, and my friend managed to get a bag. And by then, everyone on the plane knew something was wrong, especially the adults. And when the plane landed, the adults yelled for all the students to stay seated so that my daughter and I could exit first. Unfortunately, the rest of the plane did not know what was going on, so we just had to wait. And so I received a call from my sister while I was standing there, asking if I had heard. And she assured me it probably wasn't Steph. What were the chances? And I tried to believe her. And I texted my husband and I said, "Is Steph okay?" And he said no one could reach her. As time went by, I received a frantic text and a plea from my oldest son to get off the plane. And finally a call, and he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Is Steph okay?" And he said, "Mom, you've got to hurry. It's bad. Dad needs you." And we ran off the plane. My son took us aside and told us Steph was gone. In disbelief, I said, "Are you sure? Is she not just hurt?" My sister-in-law, Dr. Stephanie Husen, was one of 4 victims murdered during the mass shooting in the Natalie building at St. Francis Hospital. My family's lives quickly became a nightmare that we could never wake up from. But I believe Steph would want me to tell you my story as a mom, for my mom, and most importantly for her mom, who honestly prefers me to do most of the talking. Guns are the #1 killer of America's youth, and Steph would want all of us to try to make this world a safer place for children. People always talk about what an amazing person the victim was. Aunt Steffi was no different. I could take hours to tell you about her because she truly was an amazing person inside and out. Steph was the light at every family event. She had the best laugh, and she laughed a lot. She loved to give gifts all throughout the year. You never got just one gift from Steph. It was usually a fun box of odds and ends that you never knew you needed. And cards. Not just a card, but at least 2 or 3 cards, and usually one with some crass humor. And I love buying her gifts too, because we're close in age and love the same things. I always thought that we would grow old together. She was always taking my kids on adventures and never too scared to do the wild things like bungee jumping with them, which I would not do. She always took time to attend their sporting or school events, even with her busy schedule as a doctor. During COVID, she decorated our fence with embarrassing and large photos and signs on the kids' birthdays. She braved a snowstorm to surprise my oldest son with his Valentine's gift at his apartment. My middle son had just celebrated his 17th birthday, May 31st that year. Aunt Steffi was never able to give him his present that we know she had all planned, and his birthday will never be the same. During one of her outings with my daughter, she shared in conversation that she loved her so much that she would take a bullet for her, never believing that she actually would. We feel she was a real hero that day. She was trying to distract the shooter so that others could escape. That's how brave she was. Our family was in shock, but we didn't know what to do. We didn't even know where to start. But we knew we had to do something. And with time, we started to see what we could do. We could try to bring awareness and understanding to Oklahomans of the devastating impact of gun violence. In the months following the shooting, we met with many legislators. Mainly, we tried to convince them to make stricter regulations when purchasing guns, such as red flag laws or a waiting period. Well, most of these meetings resulted in thoughts and prayers. It made us realize we needed to stay involved, and our legislators needed to hear from all of us. Some of them told us that they only hear from gun dealers or that their hands are honestly tied by the OK2A gun lobby. Our representatives need to hear your voices too. As you already know, Oklahoma is a gun-loving state, by which I mean there are at least 70 gun-related laws proposed at the Capitol every year. Nearly all of these are proposed by the OK2A. So, for the last 3 years, our family's been working to raise awareness of the impact of gun violence by starting the Oklahoma branch of a national organization called the Soulbox Project. The Soulbox Project is a national community art project to raise awareness about the scale of the U.S. gunfire epidemic. It features an art exhibit made with origami boxes, pieced together a lot like the AIDS quilt from the 80s. Each box is made by survivors, loved ones, and activists, and they represent a victim of gun violence in the U.S. This exhibit is really designed to reach visitors on an emotional level. to have someone walk by this display and just have a moment. Maybe they might decide to go home and lock up their gun, or a mother will talk to her kids about anger and retribution, or maybe make a voter write to their legislator or local paper. Or the biggest change might be a legislator might actually rethink their vote on the next dangerous gun bill. Every one of those actions we would consider a success. We feel that we need to appeal to each other on an emotional level if we want to change the current gun culture. So this exhibit also enables people to actually see the numbers and not just see people as statistics. Our exhibit now has over 900 boxes representing the total victims injured or killed in Oklahoma in just over 13 months. In the United States as a whole, it's 3.5 days. So for the last 3 years, we've had it at the Guthrie Green, the Philbrook Museum, and Circle Cinema. So we would like to invite you and your fellow activists to the Capitol where you can join us. We're calling it Artivism. You'll have information about dangerous gun bills at the table. And like I said before, and we will give you a script and probably 1 or 2 laws to really focus on. Or you could just go in there and just tell them how you feel about the gun laws and the OK2A, honestly. Anything will help. As we visited with the legislators, a lot of times they said they never hear from the other side, which we know is not true. But if we show up with as many people as possible, as often as possible, it will become impossible for them to ignore. And most Oklahomans in recent studies want stricter gun laws. As history has shown us, gun-related crime is going to continue. So we need to make our voices heard. What happened to Stephanie, and frankly this week, showed all of us that this can happen to anyone at any time. Our family hopes for a day where we will not be traumatized over and over by another story of gun violence. After we lost Stephanie, one of her friends coined a phrase to remind us of her kindness and her strength and her courage that inspires us every day. That phrase is #BeLikeSteph. We hope that you can be like Steph, because we know that you guys are a strong and courageous group that can do anything. So we hope to see you at the Capitol, February 17th. You can go to soulboxproject.org if you want more information about it. And I welcome any questions. But thank you so much for letting me have my talk. I have to write it all out or else I might forget something.
Go ahead and put your questions in the chat if you have any.
Beth, Beth, would you mind putting your website in the chat for everyone?
Sure.
Donna is asking if you could tell us some legislators who are welcoming on this topic.
I would say that obviously Representative Provenzano is wonderful, but most of them are not receptive. I mean, they will be nice to your face, but I'm just being honest with you. They'll be nice, but they will not necessarily say that they'll do anything. Like this is a group I can be very honest and frank with, and a lot of our legislators just smiled and nodded when we talked to them. They gave us they were an audience, but they never promised anything. Langford prayed with us and told us, his wife told us that at least she's in a better place. So yeah. So I can be honest with you guys. I don't go telling everybody that, but I don't know too much about the bills right now. I see the question about the bills. That's something we'll have to give you guys if you show up at the Capitol, or I can actually send them to you guys and that way you can make phone calls if you can't come to the Capitol. And I will be sure to, let you guys know everything and anything that comes up that you can call about.
Beth Delancey wants to know what bill you think is most promising this session,
Yeah,
if
I
any.
don't know yet. Representative Provenzano said she'd kind of give me a heads up about some of them. And so there's a couple legislators that are great. And that would be, well, unfortunately, Mayor Nichols was great when he was there. And he and Provenzano were the best to us. But as soon as I find out more about the bills, because right now they're not in session, and so we don't, there's a few, I can give you also the website that you can find. I will give you that too. I don't have it in front of me, but there is, you guys kind of probably know some of the websites that you can go to, but a lot of times those aren't accurate. The Oklahoma Policy Institute will, when he comes to speak to you guys, he will tell you a lot of the websites that you can go to. He'll give you a lot more detail about what to do and what you can do when you go up there.
Yeah, Donna says she'll share the websites too with the group.
Unfortunately, they're not always accurate. That's why we want to try to get Representative Provenzano to give us the latest.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been doing that for the last 3 years for us.
She's great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thank you so much, Beth.
Yeah, thank you.
We really appreciate you being with us.
Thank you.
And now I'm going to introduce Rich Logis. Is that how your name is? Is he unmuted, Beth?
I'm here. Can everyone hear me?
Hi, Rich. Yeah. How's your last name pronounced, Rich?
You said it right, Logis.
Logis. Okay, great. Rich is a Florida father of two and a small business owner who was a supporter of Donald Trump from 2015 to 2022. After he left the MAGA community, he formed Leaving MAGA, a new community for those who have left the movement or are giving thought to leaving. And he says, without a new community to go to, most will never leave MAGA, even if they know they should. Thanks for being with us tonight, Rich, and we're looking forward to hearing your story.
Yeah, it's my pleasure, Susan, and thank you to Carissa also for helping to put this together. If I may ask, how are we looking for time?
Fine, we're good.
Okay.
Good. We usually our meetings usually last from 6:30 to 8. There's lots of time for questions and whatever you need to feel like you need to, whatever's on your heart, Rich. Say to us tonight.
Thank you. I want to first, as I do before any time I meet with new people, I would like to apologize for my past MAGA activism. Had I met all of you when I was in MAGA, I would have deemed all of you to be an existential threat to my life, my livelihood, my family, and my country. And you did not deserve to be dehumanized like that. So I like to start with a mea culpa. I'll talk a little bit about my own odyssey in and out of MAGA. In 2015 and 16, I was someone who felt very politically homeless and lonely. And I thought that the two parties were the same. I believe that they failed to represent most Americans and that they only served at the behest of the wealthy and the powerful. And my belief about democracy was that in order to save it, we needed to destroy it. And Donald Trump seemed like a person who was willing and able to obliterate the established political order. And I was not somebody who was immediately enamored with the Trump campaign, but in the months subsequent to his declaration as a candidate, I found myself nodding more and more with some of his statements about our economy and about jobs going overseas, about once vibrant communities that had been hollowed out. I knew people who had lost business to other countries. So a lot of what he was saying economically did resonate with me, especially as a small business owner. But it was in early 2016 when I decided to fully ingratiate myself into the MAGA community. And I worked as a volunteer on the campaign. I did grassroots activism. I helped people get registered to vote. I recruited people to vote for Trump. I even wrote part of the call script for the campaign. And in that contribution I made, I said, let's make history and elect Donald Trump president. And unfortunately, that history was made, but it's history that I wish had turned out quite differently from how it has. And after the 2016 election, I didn't just go away and tell everyone I had met, see you in 4 years. I got deeper and deeper into the MAGA world. I became a podcaster. I spent a great deal of my own money on podcasting for my MAGA activism. I wrote for lots of MAGA-friendly media. I had bylines in places like Fox and The Federalist, Real Clear Politics. I even wrote for a site, WND, World Net Daily, which is the site that originated the Obama birther conspiracy. And I knew that, but I didn't care because I believed that I was embroiled in a good versus evil political battle. And anyone who was not with us in MAGA, whether they were a Democrat or a liberal or a progressive or an anti-Trump Republican and conservative, anyone who was not with us, we considered to be against us. And it didn't matter if somebody was 99% with us. If they were not 100% with us, they were 100% against us. And that's how I lived within the MAGA, the first term of Trump's presidency. And that was my life for 4 years. And it was after leaving MAGA that I came to realize that I had allowed myself to be in this perpetual state of desperation and panic and despair and fear and paranoia and rage. And it was near the end of 2020 when some of my own cracks started to form in my MAGA allegiance. The first accelerant was really actually not Donald Trump. It was my governor, Ron DeSantis, here in Florida, who platformed COVID anti-vaxxers at one of his pressers. And after he did that, it really confused me. And I did not understand why he had done that. And that prompted me to do something that sounds very, very simple, but was profoundly life-changing and altering for me, which is I diversified my news and information sources. And I stepped out of the right-wing media echo chamber and started to expand the types of information that I was consuming. And as I did that, I came to better understand Trump's mismanagement of the pandemic. I came to better understand what happened on January 6th. I had never believed that the election was stolen. I never thought that Donald Trump had actually won the election, and it continued to anger me that he was telling his supporters that they had been disenfranchised and that their votes had been stolen and that they were defrauded. I never believed that. But after that incident with DeSantis, I went through an entire year of what I call my year of heaven and hell. And I vacillated between being in a MAGA and then being out of it. And I wrestled and struggled with my own thoughts and my own doubts for an entire year. I would hear Trump talk about the stolen election, for example, and I would think, I can't support this. But then I would look at a photograph of an event at Mar-a-Lago that I went to as an example, and I thought, no, this is the right place for me. So I yo-yoed like that for an entire year. And the final straw for me was on May 24th, 2022, which was the Uvalde, Texas school shooting. And even though Trump was not president at the time, I knew exactly how the Republican Party was going to respond to that massacre. And I knew that they would talk about the need for more guns. They would shun any talk about more sensible additional firearm safety laws. I knew that they would talk about armed teachers. And if everyone recalls, Trump showed up at an NRA event a few days after Uvalde. And it was after that event that I decided finally to leave, and I privately left MAGA. But there was something that was really gnawing at me because I was always so unapologetically public in my support for Trump. I felt that I needed to reciprocate and I needed to be unapologetically public in my renunciation of MAGA. And it was on August 30th of 2022, which is the day that I call my Leaving MAGAversary. I wrote and published an article. And in that article, I said that I was sorry for supporting Trump and MAGA and that I wanted to apologize to anyone I may have hurt with my words, deeds, and rhetoric. And the God's honest truth, everyone, is that when I wrote that article and published it, I never thought that anybody would care. And instantaneously after I wrote that story, I had friends and family of those who are MAGA identified reaching out to me, desperate, trying to figure out ways to rejuvenate their relationships with their MAGA friends and family. And I was completely naive and oblivious to this. I had been really ignorant about the fact that millions of relationships had been torn asunder as a result of this movement. And I had to go through a personal reckoning in realizing that I had helped the president divide the country and that I was culpable in assisting him in amplifying conspiracy theories. And I like to paraphrase Hemingway when I say that my epiphany happened gradually and then suddenly all at once. And after I wrote that mea culpa, I spent the next year recounting my story to anyone in media or organizations who wanted to hear from me. And born from the telling of my story was our organization, Leaving MAGA. And I had never run a nonprofit before, but I knew that I had to do something more than just telling my story because I knew that there had to be others out there who also had left MAGA, who also had been having doubts like I was. So I started up the organization in 2024. I'm happy to report now in our third year that we have never been busier, that we are meeting people who were 2024 MAGA supporters, who are telling their stories with us and giving witness to their own odyssey. We're also meeting people who are currently in MAGA and are having doubts and are confused about whether or not this is a movement that they can continue to support. So for any of you out there who have your some friends or some relatives who are in MAGA, I believe that they're good people deep down. But I believe that even though I don't defend anyone's ignorance, I think it's important to recognize that all of us are susceptible to being influenced. And I believe that people in MAGA have had their fears and their concerns exploited and manipulated. And I said at the Democratic National Convention in 2024, I worked on Kamala's campaign. I was a Florida co-chair for Republicans for Harris here in Florida. And I said in a video testimonial that Trump's toxic superpower is lying. And I believe that for your friends and family right now who are in MAGA, I think for many of them, there's going to come a point where they're going to reach a red line. And there's going to be one betrayal too many. There's going to be one lie too many. And I think it's going to cause them to start to question and have their own doubts and their own suspicions about whether the MAGA movement is something that they can continue to support and get behind. And I refer to MAGA as a community. And the reason it's a community, the reason it was a community for me is I found a sense of belonging. I found camaraderie. I had a second family of my MAGA compatriots. And as embarrassed as I am to admit this, sometimes that MAGA second family took precedence over my own blood family. And I neglected at times my duties as a parent, and as a husband. But I justified it because I believe that I was in an existential battle against domestic enemies who were against us. And after leaving MAGA, I became what I like to call a born again human being. And what leaving MAGA really means is ceasing to dehumanize people who don't think the way we do and don't agree with us. And as part of becoming a born again human being, it brought great clarity in my life. And I always say that leaving MAGA was good for my soul, my psyche, and my mental health. And I want to encourage all of you to not give up on your friends and your family and your close ones who are in MAGA. Some of my friends whom I lost contact with as a result of MAGA, when I went back to them after I left, I asked all of them if they would accept my apology for categorizing them as blue voters who posed a threat to me. And all of them accepted my apology. And in fact, one in particular, who was very influential in my life and was a mentor to me in college, he said to me, "Rich, apology accepted. I always knew that you'd come back." And so I believe that I believe it is not hopeless with your friends and relatives. I do think that there's going to come a point when the lies and the betrayals are going to become too much. And what I would encourage everyone to do is to let your MAGA friends and relatives know that if they ever have doubts themselves, that they can turn to you as a friendly ear, without judgment, without ostracization, where they will feel comfortable and confident that they could confide in you when the day comes that they start to ask themselves if this is something that they can continue to support. So I would like Susan to take some questions. I see the chat popping up, and I'd like to get to as many questions as we can because I'm sure that there's a lot of questions that everybody has for me.
Sure. The first question is Catherine Ackenhausen says, from your work, what do you see as the main reasons that folks are leaving MAGA?
Sure, there's actually several reasons, and in no particular order of priority. There are tariffs, there's the inhumane treatment of immigrants, and even before the, I want to say murders, but I'm going to say alleged murders of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, even before what's happened with ICE, the inhumane treatment of immigrants, tariffs, also the Epstein story. What's actually remarkable about the Epstein story is that in our current media environment where stories come and go, the Epstein story is not going, it's staying. And I think the cognitive dissonance amongst some people in MAGA is that if they feel that Donald Trump is lying about the Epstein story, then what else is it that he might be lying about? And I do think that the Epstein story in particular is going to keep driving a wedge between Trump and MAGA supporters. And I think that he knows that. And I think it's what partly explains some of his particularly unhinged behavior that we've seen from him over the last few months.
I'm sorry, Pam Snodgrass wants to know, how do we get them past Fox News so that we can believe the same news? I think that's what she's saying.
Definitely a challenge. I have said and will continue to say that I think that Rupert Murdoch has traumatized more Americans than anyone else in the history of media and the history of the world. But I have an idea that sometimes it's succeeded and sometimes it hasn't, but it's what I call information bartering. And what it is you provide a source of information, an article, an op-ed, anything that you would read, and you share it with your MAGA friend and relative, and you agree to read something that they provide you. And as part of that information bartering, after each person has had a chance to read the other's article or op-ed or whatever it may be, then you can ask the person in MAGA if they agreed or disagreed with the facts that were in that article. And I like information bartering, folks, because something that I want to recommend against in conversation with your MAGA friends and
Hey,
relatives
Dad, I didn't see it
is
with my own eyes. I
something I want to recommend that you avoid doing is to avoid talking about facts and policy. Facts just do not move people. What moves people is how we make decisions, I've come to learn, which is through feelings, perceptions, and emotions. And as much as there might be a mythology of rugged individualism within MAGA and blank your feelings, the fact is that MAGA is an almost wholly emotional and conformist community. And sharing information with each other is a way to try to better understand why the person in MAGA believes what they believe. And a lot of times when I ask friends and relatives to do that, sometimes there's a little bit of pushback because there might be an implication that's construed as I'm asking you to agree or defend or accept what the person in MAGA is saying, but I'm not asking you to do that. I'm not asking you to compromise your own beliefs, your own values, your own mores, but better understanding why the person in MAGA believes what they believe also will enable you to better identify their sources of information. And if there's if there's a way of better identifying their source of information, then it arms you with the knowledge that what they're hearing and what they're reading and seeing is propagandizing them, because that's what Fox does. You know, Fox, I wrote an article for Fox. It was it was only one time, but I remember feeling so much pride in getting a byline in Fox News because I had tried and tried and tried to get published there, and I finally did. And it was after, and when I was in MAGA, I did watch Fox, not all the time, but I was a big fan of Tucker Carlson, as most people in MAGA were. And now we see what's happened with Tucker Carlson and Megyn Kelly and other Fox personalities, which is a different conversation. But I think that you can get past Fox News gradually by introducing other information sources. And what some of the pushback will be on that will be, well, that's liberal media and that's Democratic media. And I think that that's an opening for you to say, hey, even if an article or an op-ed is biased, you know, is that reason all media is biased to some extent. And I think if people realize that they're consuming biased media, it might make them open to hearing other ideas.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Very helpful. I need to go back and address a question that was asked early on by Roger Desprez. He says, I wonder if Rich can address how does one open up dialogue with someone who is in MAGA? For instance, someone I know brought up the first shooting in Minnesota and said that person was trying to kill the ICE agent. I just shut up. It seems that I should somehow be able to get into a dialogue, but no idea how. You kind of covered that just now, but if you have any other thoughts about that.
Yeah, and again, it's another challenge, and I think that you know there's two realities that we have when it comes to people in MAGA and people not in MAGA. And the right wing has done a very effective job of creating an alternative reality where people deny what it is that their own eyes are showing them. And I think that if there's going to be an approach to try to get people to agree on basic facts, I feel like we have no choice but to try to find some relatability and common ground with people where we might ask them, why do you feel, why do we have a difference of reality here where we have such a drastic difference of opinion? And it's a way of it's not to debate the other person because we don't want to bait them into a debate or an argument, but to get people to have to explain their own reality. And I think that the more people in MAGA explain their own reality, the more holes open up as avenues of opportunity for us to show them that, for example, Alex Preddy was not posing a threat and was a legal firearm owner, and point out the contradictions that the Republican Party and MAGA are staunchly pro Second Amendment people, and yet here's a person who is exercising his Second Amendment right, who is exercising his First Amendment right, and we're criticizing him for exercising that right. Isn't that a contradiction to what MAGA believes? And I think it's a fair question to ask someone and let them answer that question. Ask it and then just wait for an answer. And if you ask it enough, if people ask it enough, people in MAGA will start to see some of the hypocrisy and contradictions that right now, until they're pointed out, they're not seeing.
Thanks. Pam Snodgrass also wants to know, some of my friends are afraid we'll have a civil war with MAGAs. What are your thoughts?
So there is, unfortunately, some segment of MAGA. I would say that they're ones who are probably terminally and chronically online, who I have no illusions about this, would probably stay with Trump and MAGA no matter what. I think that the good news, though, is that we will avoid something that might be akin to a civil war, but I do fear the bad news, which is that I am concerned about more violence from the state, from the federal government against our own citizens. I said many months ago that I was really worried that we were going to have our own modern day Kent State moment. And now we've had multiple Kent State type moments. So I think that I think wide scale violence will be avoided, but I am quite anxious and nervous about more violence as a result of people simply and understandably becoming intolerant of what ICE continues to do in our cities, and that I'm worried that it's going to result in mutual violence against each other, because you can only push people so far until they feel like there's no recourse except to commit violence. And look, our side, we're not the violent side, and I don't think most in MAGA are violent, but I do think that if there is violence, it's almost certainly going to be caused by the most extreme who are in MAGA. And unfortunately, MAGA is an extremist group because its adherents are encouraged to dehumanize others. And if you believe that your opponent is human scum, as the president says, then it's not that big of a leap to say that and think that and commit violence.
That's true. That was definitely a tool that Hitler and the Nazis used as well against the Jews. We have a question from Susan Badaracco. Why was the murder of Rob Reiner such a pivotal moment for a lot of MAGAs when there have been so many issues among them, immigrants, the Epstein files, etc.?
Susan, could you repeat, because the Zoom
Did you
froze
say,
up for a moment?
okay, Susan, did you mean the murder of Rob Reiner or the death of Rob Reiner? Oh yeah, the murder. Yeah, he was murdered. Yeah, there were a lot of people who were real unhappy with the Trump response to that. She says, "Why was the murder of Rob Reiner such a pivotal moment for a lot of MAGA when there have been so many other issues?"
Well, I think that it comes back again to one of the reasons that I left MAGA, which was the flippant acceptance of avoidable deaths and suffering. And the way that the president spoke about Rob Reiner just shows his complete and utter lack of good character and integrity. And I believe that Trump, at one time, I believe that he was a person of integrity. I believe that he was running to be president for the right reasons, thinking that he didn't need the job, and that made him the right person at the right time. But the particular story and the way that Trump responded to Rob Reiner, it showed, I believe it showed a particular depravity that caused some people in MAGA to have pause. And and to maybe for some of them, it was one betrayal too many, where if a person speaks so ill of the dead, what does it say about the movement that he might be leading? And it's why I do think that for some in MAGA, the way that Trump responded to Rob Reiner pushed them just a little further to starting to have doubts. And I'm of the belief, everyone, that I think there are more amongst us who are quietly having doubts about MAGA. I think that there are more than we realize who maybe have quietly left. And our goal at Leaving MAGA is to meet those individuals and let them tell their stories with us, because our strength is really in our numbers and in our storytelling. So I think that the Reiner story serves as a lesson of the lack of morality that Donald Trump possesses. And if he is the titular leader of MAGA is that way, what does it say about the movement itself?
Yeah, that seems like so long ago. There's been so much that has
I know
happened
it's
since.
exactly, a million news stories that have
I
happened
know, I
since and
know.
continue to.
Linda Zablotsky has a question. Do you think Trump's unhinged behavior is all Epstein, or a combination of dementia and just, I guess, his personality? Uh, or is he behaving? I think what she means is he behaving in such a way as to draw attention away from the Epstein files,
I
or
don't
is he
think there's
just
any
crazy?
doubt that he's wanted to change the subject from the Epstein story. He campaigned on getting those files released, and then when he became president, he fought to keep them sealed. And I'll note that the Department of Justice continues to remain in contempt an act of Congress to release those files. I believe it's only 1% of all the files available that have been released. So the act of Congress has been willfully ignored. And that's what someone like Trump does. He ignoring court orders, ignoring acts of Congress, the politicization and the weaponization of law enforcement, all of the accusations that they made about President Biden, they're doing themselves. And that's always been the first rule of propaganda, which is to accuse your opposition of what you yourself are guilty. So I
Hmm.
think that the Epstein story is one that he's worked very hard to avoid and to try to change the subject on. But this story is not going away, and we have to just keep at it. We have to keep supporting the victims. The victims continue to speak up, and as they keep speaking up, I think more and more people in MAGA are whom I believe care about the well-being of children and care about the fact that so many were trafficked. that they're wondering what Trump's involvement with Jeffrey Epstein may have been. And the more he lies about it, it'll be one lie too many for some, and it will make them wonder if Trump's lying about anything else. And remember this is what he says publicly. So God only knows what he actually says privately.
Yeah. Carissa has a question. I would like to know what your experience has been with those in MAGA who support Trump because he's quote unquote Christian. How can we get them to understand there is a difference between Christian and Christian nationalist? And Rita has a related question. I think these questions go really well together. How did MAGA hijack Christianity? She says her family are professionals, educators, attorneys, but they just shut down and won't discuss anything about politics. How to open a conversation. So I guess the two questions about religion are how can we help them understand it's not the same thing as being a Christian? I know people like that at my church too. And how did they manage to hijack Christianity? So at certain parts of Christianity anyway, for sure, the evangelical movement so thoroughly.
So there's a lady whose story we told. Her name is Stefania, and I would encourage everyone to take some time and read the stories at our website at leavingmaga.org, where we've got nearly 24 testimonials. There's a lady named Stefania whose entree into MAGA was through her Christian nationalist church. And I think that the answer is there's a philosophical term, and I might get it wrong here, and someone's got to correct me, which is Occam's razor, which is that the most likely conclusion is the accurate one. And I think with Christian nationalism, the most logical outcome and explanation is about power. And Christian nationalists have found in Trump somebody who was willing to exploit religion and pervert it, all in the name of seizing power. Something that Trump has done, and I think it's really his advisors more than he himself, because I don't think Trump himself thinks through a lot of what it is that he does, but his advisors do. And what his advisors do is first off, they create chaos, then they dismantle institutions, and then they look to consolidate power. And even though I don't use the word fascism a lot, because I feel like people don't generally talk that way and don't think of that term and don't understand it, I think that it's applicable here, because fascism is really an ideology. And in that ideology, one of the core tenets is disrupting the social contract. And I think that Christian nationalists, with the support of Trump, are trying to disrupt that social contract by wanting this country to be a Christian theocracy. But our country is a secular nation. You know, it's right in the plain text in the First Amendment, which is that Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion. But why would someone want there to be a Christian nation? It's because of the power. It's because of the tool of oppression and tyranny. And as a secular nation, it's why there's this mythology in MAGA about America being a Judeo-Christian nation, when in fact we are not that. But I think the most likely explanation is that they see Trump as someone who can help them consolidate power.
That's always a temptation in religion. Jesus warned about that.
Absolutely.
What about Rita's question? How to open a conversation specifically about religion? Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, I think I think it's a fair question to ask someone when it comes up contextually. what is to ask the person who identifies as a Christian to maybe explain what they think are the Christian values that Trump espouses, and do a compare and contrast between what what values we grew up with for those who are Christian. I'm a Catholic. I like to joke that I'm an excommunicated Catholic. My wife does not like that joke, um, but I'm a
I,
believer. We raise our kids Catholic. We're not the most religious group. We're not church going, but I know how I was raised and the Catholic Christian values that were instilled in me. And I think it's a fair question to ask someone and say, hey, what are the values that you think Trump embodies? And when they answer, we can hold them to account. And we could say, well, the values that I learned were that we take care of the poor and that we give shelter to the needy. These are traditionally Christian values, and Donald Trump does not believe those values. So how do we reconcile this contradiction? And I think that it's okay to ask that question of someone because it can again help them recognize the contradiction of their own belief and the hypocrisy of the people that they're following.
speaking as a fellow grumpy Catholic, did you see? I don't know if you saw today, but Cardinal Tobin of Newark came out to in favor of abolishing ICE. He's the
Oh, I didn't see
closest.
that.
He's the archbishop that's closest to Pope Leo, and he came out and just flat out said that ICE needs to go. So I was happy to see that. Um, Catherine wants to know what was the blowback for you after leaving MAGA? Were there threats against you and your family? Did they just write you off? And also, Beverly wants to know something similar. Do you find yourself a target of your previous MAGA friends? Do you have safety concerns?
So thankfully, I have avoided any kinds of threats against myself or my family. I imagine as Leaving MAGA becomes more known and I hope more influential, I imagine that that's probably going to change. I would say that the majority of blowback I get is really online from those in MAGA who are chronically online. And the comments vary from I wasn't really MAGA to I'm a paid Democratic operative, which, if that's the case, I really want to know where all this money is because I'm accused of it so much. There must be someone, and we accept checks and all major credit cards and Venmo and PayPal, and if we get cash, I'll declare it on the IRS tax return. So we get that, and I just like you're doing, Susan, I chuckle, I laugh at it. There are also
We
some
we get
harsh
that too.
comments. What's that?
We get that too. We're our
Yeah,
trolls
right.
are always telling us we're paid by George Soros. My husband would love it if we would get paid.
Exactly. If only, if
Hmm.
only we were. So I get those a lot. I laugh them off. I also get some comments that are a little unnerving that tend to be very homophobic. And I have, I'm not qualified to make any kind of psychiatric or psychological assessment, but I believe that the homophobic comments are cries for help. I think that any grown man who would call another grown man the gay slur F word is probably crying out for some kind of help. And again, I think it shows how the MAGA movement has really traumatized its adherents into dehumanizing other people. And I'm not defending the dehumanization. Everyone has agency. We're all responsible for our own decisions and actions. But at the same time, I do think that even though we shouldn't coddle people in MAGA as adults, I do think, again, it's to reiterate the point that people can be subsumed into this right-wing way of thinking, and it does something to people where I feel like it changes many people. I can't tell you how many stories I've heard from friends and family who say to me, you know, Rich, before 2016, my friend, my sister, my mother, my father, they were very different people before 2016. And I think again, that's what it's the efficaciousness and the power, the influence of what this right-wing propaganda can do to people. And it will create an alternative reality, so much so that it results in these kinds of homophobic slurs that I get. You know, I also get from time to time comments about being a pedophile, which again, talking about the Epstein story, you know, I maybe it's perhaps it's projection. A psychologist might argue it's projection, but I do receive them. But I'm awaiting the day when I might get some threats, and I don't look forward to that day, but what I ultimately hope is that I eventually get the attention of the president. When I was a pundit, I tried very, very hard to get the attention of the president. I was an aspiring MAGA pundit with my podcast and with my articles, and I never got his attention. But I'm hoping with Leaving MAGA that I will, and I hope it comes sooner rather than later.
I hope that for you too. You know what we get instead of homophobic comments or comments about how we're old, fat white ladies, so many of us, or just insults that we're all old, you know, like that's a really bad thing. I mean, I don't know that they're all real young either, but you know, it's a lot of projection. I have a couple of questions here. Linda and Carla are asking, do you think MAGA has any concern over Trump's physical and mental decline? And Carla wants to know, how does MAGA not justify not calling out Trump's health issues after all the uproar over Biden? Do they really think he's functioning okay? Or do they realize that there's probably other people making policy for him?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of what I call whataboutism when it comes to looking at Trump's deterioration. I have to think that for some in MAGA, many perhaps, they can't keep denying what their eyes are telling them and what they see and observe and on a daily basis. So I do think for some in MAGA that they are cognizant of the president's decline. I think that it might be a reason that forms a crack. And if we have conversations with people in MAGA who might question the president's faculties, that's a crack that we can look to in a positive way, look to exploit. And I feel like it's a crack that in a chasm that can continue to widen because I think the president is becoming increasingly unhinged, and it can
Sure.
maybe start bringing people in MAGA back to the reality that we want them to be in, not the alternative right-wing reality that has been shaped by them, by the media and the information they consume.
Yeah, for sure. That would be great. Do you think there's a related question from D is, do you think MAGA will die when Trump dies?
So I don't think that MAGA will go away, but I do think that when Trump is off the political scene, that it will unravel. And I think one of the reasons it will unravel is because what Trump has done very effectively is he's taken right-wing politics, which have existed for generations, and he gave them a brand name, Make America Great Again. And as the person who has done the branding, that's why he's the titular leader of the party and of the community. It's why there's such fealty to Trump as that leader, as that main chief spokesperson of the movement. And I don't see anyone being able to supplant him with the same kind of impact and influence that he's had in being able to to dominate our politics for a decade. Now that's the good news that I believe it will unravel. There is some bad news though that we can prepare ourselves for. If in fact MAGA starts to unravel, then it means that millions of people are going to be at a crossroads. And we have to catch some of those people before they fall prey to whatever the next iteration of right-wing politics is, whether it's MAGA 2.0 or whether it's America First or some amalgam of the two of those or other right-wing ideologies. So we have to catch people before they get hooked into whatever comes next. And that's where I'm hoping our organization can really have impact. Someone said turning point. That's, another someone here, Beth, is talking about turning point. And Turning Point has had they've had such great success with our youth. And I see them expanding into older age groups as time goes on to fill a void that will occur when MAGA starts to unravel. But we need to get to people when they're in that crossroads, and that's what I hope Leaving MAGA will be able to do, which is to give them that new destination, that new community, that off ramp, the exit ramp. I just did a couple videos recently on my socials in which I said that the death of Renee Good, the death of Alex Preddy, these are exit ramps, and these are off ramps that people in MAGA can take, and that I wanted them to take the off ramp, and that we would not judge, we would not censure them. Yes, people do need to take responsibility. No one can ever actually leave MAGA without taking responsibility for their past. And at Leaving MAGA as an organization, we don't have a purity test of any kind. Someone doesn't have to become a Democrat or become a progressive, but they do need to take accountability for their past. And every one of our leaders has done that. And we have a very diverse assortment. We have men and women, we have white people, we have Hispanics, we have one who's a Black American, we have gay, we have straight, we have even someone who was at January 6th and served prison time and rejected Trump's pardon for his actions on January 6th. So, and we have some who are very left-leaning, some who are centrist, and we even have one who considers himself still a little more conservative-leaning. So we don't have any ideological requirement. The only non-negotiable mandate is that people need to say that I'm sorry for what I've done and I'm looking to make amends.
Sounds kind of like AA.
Well, actually, as we speak right now, what's simultaneously we have our weekly support groups that we do.
Mm-hmm.
And for those of you who have friends and family, and I imagine that most of you do, who are in MAGA, our Tuesday night support groups are very well attended. We hold them at 7 o'clock Eastern, Tuesday nights. And if there's ever an opportunity that any of you have to attend, they're free and they're open. We don't charge for them. We don't believe that there should be any financial obstacle to people getting the support. And we have a joke, Susan, that we call it privately. We call it MAGA Anon.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, we refer to
Sounds
it
like
as MAGA
the 12
Anon.
steps, the 12 steps of
Yes.
Leaving MAGA. That's great. I love it. There's a related question. Do you think they'll fall in line with JD Vance? And Cindy, who asked this question, says, or Marjorie Taylor Greene is a new leader. I don't know. Marjorie is kind of on your path anymore, I think.
So I'm encouraged by her words about the president. What makes me nervous about Marjorie Taylor Greene is it doesn't seem that she has renounced the divisiveness of America First. And it seems that one of her dissatisfactions with the president is that he's not right-wing enough for her.
Mm.
And that still concerns me about where she's at right now, although I am heartened by the fact that she's recognized how divisive the president's toxic rhetoric really is. So I'm keeping my eye on Marjorie Taylor Greene, and I've got an open mind about her. And if she's on a pathway to her own road to Damascus moment of the scales falling from her eyes, then I'll be the first one to credit her. But I think that it still remains to be seen if this is in fact a Leaving MAGA transformation that she's undergoing right now.
You guys need to start kind of a door-to-door program like the Jehovah Witnesses or something. I'm kidding, but
Well, actually, we
you
are.
can go knock on her door.
Um, so it related to that, I don't know exactly when it will launch, but we are working in collaboration with an organization in Idaho who works in 12 states, including Florida, where we are going to do text outreach to people who live in rural areas
Oh, good.
and also to people into areas we've identified as being extremist hotbeds.
That's great.
And I just want to be clear that I'm not suggesting that someone who lives in a rural area is necessarily an extremist. I just want to clarify that point lest I say it in a confusing way. But we've identified places where we feel like there's a high concentration of extremists, and we're going to be doing text outreach and going to where they are.
That's fantastic. Somebody who was on the call, I'm not sure they're still here, had asked a question related to that. He said, we're so tempted to use reason to sway opinion, but as you said, MAGA is about emotion, community, and fear. In Oklahoma, statistics show many MAGA are rural and not college educated people. Their churches are community and communities are MAGA. How can we use that knowledge to welcome them into our community? And how can we find someone to include them to replace Tucker Carlson? I don't know. That's an interesting one.
You know, there's nothing like face-to-face conversation. I am a registered independent, although I did vote Democratic in 2024, and I will vote Democratic for the foreseeable future, even though I think most people who vote Democratic probably have issues with the party. There's an old saying, I believe it was, I'm not exactly sure who originated it, but it's the saying, I'm not a member of any organized party, I'm a Democrat.
Well, that was Will Rogers. He
That
was
was
an
Will
Oklahoma
Rogers.
boy.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
who it
yeah.
was. Will
I grew up in Will
Rogers.
Rogers' hometown. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. He
okay.
knew the Oklahoma Democratic Party very well. Um, he's absolutely right about that. Um,
You know, and as a registered independent, something that I was really excited about, and it seems to have gone away, is I remember last year Democrats were going into rural areas
mhm.
and they were going to where people were and they were having face-to-face conversations with people in rural areas. And this is, to me, this is one of the great shames about the divisions between all of us and people in MAGA. There is more agreement than there is disagreement. You know, we and people in MAGA, we care about economic opportunity. We care about a safe and secure country. We want good schools for our children. We want affordable health care. You know, these are mutual agreements that we have. And the challenge is trying to get people in MAGA to recognize that the ones they're following are deliberately dividing us because it's very lucrative to keep us divided and keep us at odds with each other. And I was really disappointed that the Democratic Party who was doing these town halls seemed to just stop doing them. And I would like to see them resurrect these because when you're in front of someone in a rural area and you've got someone who maybe is more liberal leaning and someone who's more conservative leaning, it makes it a lot harder for them to caricature each other. And
Mhm.
it makes it harder, especially for the rural person, to refer to the Democrat as a Satan worshiping pedophile when they're face to face with each other, away from a keyboard behind the guise of a computer screen. And I hope that they get back to that.
Yeah.
I really do. And I've decided with Leaving MAGA that we want to go into more rural areas where we know that we're going to meet people who are in MAGA, and give us a chance to introduce them to our leaders and
Mhm.
say, hey, we were like you, we were MAGA at one time. Here's why we left. Is there anything that the president does or the movement does that gives you pause?
That would be great. Oklahoma would be a good place to start that. You don't have to go very far in Oklahoma to be in a rural area. Rich, I want to know how much longer you have, because I know we're getting right at 8 o'clock Central Time, so 9 o'clock your time. How much longer do you have to speak?
Yeah, let's take a few more questions.
Okay, great. Yeah. Somebody says, come to Oklahoma. Yes, Dee, we would love for you to come to Oklahoma. Um, what about Project 2025? Oh, one thing I wanted to say, everyone is talking about in the chat about Turning Point. One of the things that encourages me about Turning Point is they're just absolutely cartoonishly fighting each other right now. There are people accusing Israel of murdering Charlie Cook and accusing his wife of having something to do with it.
That's what
And
I'm wondering now. That old lady,
Beth, could you
I think she thought it was all going to come to their school.
Beth, could you, yeah, mute that? Thanks. So they're in disarray just as much as the Democrats or anybody else, which is super. Actually, it's sad. It's sad that they're saying stuff like that to each other, but it's encouraging. I'm sorry, Pam wants to know, what about Project 2025? Is it a real threat? Are they still following it?
Well, I just wanted to make a quick point on Turning Point that, like any organization and movement that's based on lies and falsehoods and conspiracies, eventually it self-immolates, and eventually the house of cards, it does fall. And while I don't think Turning Point is at the point of falling, I do think that I think the internecine battles that we're seeing between the personalities are real, and I think that it's going to hinder Turning Point's abilities to really succeed, continue to succeed where they have had success, which is with our young people.
Yeah,
So
it's not a good look.
I like, I like the fact that there's infighting, because it opens up opportunities for us.
Mhm.
And then with Project 2025, I have no doubt that it's continuing to be implemented. Something that I used to say when I was in MAGA is, I used to say, the Democrats are always united. They always stick together. And of course, it's the exact opposite. It's actually the right wing who sticks together. And what they have done very effectively is they've taken years of thought and crafted Project 2025 around it. And the ideological discipline, the messaging discipline, Project 2025 embodies all of that. And what again is its goal? Its goal is power. Its goal is to dismantle institutions, create crises, and then shore up power. And that's ultimately what Project 2025 is about. It's not about making the country a better place. It's not about creating opportunity. It's not about upholding people's rights. It's about upholding the rights of those in power. And for everybody else, their rights are subject to the whims of the state.
Yeah. We have a few more questions. One I think there's a couple along this line. Why, Carla asks, how does MAGA not see that the administration's policies hurt them as constituents? Are they just so driven by racism and hate that they're willing to take the hardships that come with those policies? And Rita says, why does MAGA see the policies that are undoing democracy as supporting democracy? Those seemed like they're kind of along the same lines.
So I want to give what I hope will be maybe something of an optimistic answer. I actually do think that many in MAGA recognize that Trump is a dishonest person. And I do believe that many in MAGA do see a lot of the problems of the movement. So why then stay? Why do they continue to support? And I think that the answer has much more to do with community than it does with politics and ideology. For so many in MAGA, they are so invested in the community. And I don't mean financially, I'm talking morally,
Emotionally,
emotionally, politically. They are so invested in being correct. And to admit that they've been duped is something that nobody ever wants to acknowledge. But we at Leaving MAGA are working to change that culturally and looking to make it okay to say that we were lied to. And yes, we allowed ourselves to believe lies, but that it's okay to admit that it's okay to admit that we were lied to and that we don't want to continue living a life based on those lies anymore. So I think that a lot of people in MAGA do see the falsehoods and the conspiracies. What we have to do is let them know that there's an off ramp, and that if we're willing to welcome them back into the democratic fold, lowercase d, then it gives people a reason to listen to those doubts and to listen to their conscience.
Well, we really appreciate that you're doing this, and it's great to hear from you. I think we're out of questions, and we need to let you go. And people are heading off to dinner or bed. So, do any of the other leadership team people have anything to say or comment on? If not, I will just end the meeting and thank you so much. You'll
No,
probably be hearing from us again.
that's my pleasure, Susan. If anyone wants to read our stories, get in touch with me, visit us, please, at leavingmaga.org. I actually do check all of my emails. So my email is right on the contact page. Carissa, I think, can attest to that. When I got her email, I read it and I wrote back quickly. So if anyone wants to get in touch, please feel free to. I look forward to hearing from anyone who wants to talk more. And it was a great honor, Susan, to be with you and with everyone tonight. So thank you for the invitation.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rich.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Okay, good night, everybody.
Thank you.